this video, I'm going to show you how to use intuition to create a work of experimental design. Then I'm going to show you how to analyze the work you've just made. Why would you want to do this? Because it's a powerful way to make better work.
It's possible to research your own intuitive choices in order to learn more about your work and yourself. An important component of the creative process is research and analysis of your own work. The art we make can tell us a lot about ourselves. It can show us things about ourselves that we weren't aware of. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who founded analytical psychology, whose work has been influential in psychiatry and in the study of religion, literature, and art, developed the concept of the shadow.
You know, there are these peculiar faculties of the psyche, that it isn't entirely confined to space and time. You can have dreams or visions of the future. You can see round corners and such things. Only ignorance deny these facts. It's quite evident that they do exist and have existed always. Now, these facts show that the psyche, in part at least, is not dependent upon these confinements. And then what? When the psyche is not under that obligation to live in time and space alone, and obviously it doesn't.
The shadow is the unknown side of the self. The shadow can be thought of as those aspects of our personality unknowable and inaccessible to ourselves. Many forms of design and art are a visual representation of the shadow. This is why a systematic analysis of our own work can be so powerful. Analysis of our own work reveals the shadow. It can bring to light the previously inaccessible and unknown components of our psyche. Let's now take a look at an example from my work. Let's look at how this modal approach to creative process can work. In episode 118, part 1 of this video, I discuss how an artist can rely almost exclusively on intuition while in the actual act of constructing a work, and that this process should be bracketed by analysis and logic. Remember my diagram, think, then feel, then think? I also showed a blurred diagram that I maintain showing what I believe to be the challenges I face in my own work. That was the first think phase in the construction of the piece you see here on the screen. When actually drawing, designing, compositing, and constructing this piece, I forgot about all of that and felt my way through the work. I'm now going to walk you through phase 3 of the process, think, where I use logic and critical thinking to interpret my own work in an attempt to learn more about the work I've just created as well as about myself. The piece we see on the screen now is entitled False Floaters and is a 5-spot color hand-pulled screen print. We're looking at the Adobe Illustrator master file. You can see on the lower right third of the screen I've opened the asset export panel and I'm carefully performing a kind of dissection of my composition. I'm carefully selecting and dragging the individual components to the asset export panel, which will export the individual components of the print to a folder on my hard drive. One way of looking at this is as a kind of archaeological dig performed on my own work. As I'm exporting the files, I'm simultaneously building a précis, or a kind of conceptual diagram of the work. I've started by breaking my thinking about this work into 2 broad categories: interpretation, what this work is about, and an extended conceptual framework. When drawing this lion, I was looking for source imagery and merely browsing the internet for charged imagery to inspire the drawing. I had no concrete conceptual goal. I was merely looking for imagery that I felt had a charge. What we see here is that after the completion of the print, I initiate a research project to try to understand the deeper meaning behind the mythology of Hercules and the Nemean lion. At least in part, we learn that the battle between Hercules and the Nemean lion represents victory over the ego and symbolizes moving away from habitual selfishness. From Hercules' victory over the Nemean lion to the symbolic victory over the ego, the goal is to follow the thread. Here we see that leads to the concept of ego death. Continuing the archaeological excavation and analysis of the piece, we begin a deeper analysis of the central figure of the composition. Again, drawn with no objective outside of intuition. We see an interpretation of Grant Wood's American Gothic. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the next component subject to further research. As I continue my research, I'm attempting to tease out the personal significance of the imagery. As an example, while attempting to answer the question of why my intuition alone led me to insert a central pyramid into the composition. Through the fog of memory, I remember that in middle school in the late 1970s, I had a sustained fascination with the cultural phenomenon of this thing called pyramid power. As I continue to follow the thread, echoes of memory lead me to a few of the actual books I read as a kid, and more importantly, to the ideas that I found so seductive. As I continue to chase the beast back to its lair, I realize that my lifelong fascination with mysticism and Gnosticism is a central theme of this piece. Over the course of the last 6 months in my daily meditation practice, the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila have repeatedly presented themselves to me. I've stumbled upon them repeatedly in far-flung contexts in a seemingly coincidental pattern. Yet here again in my research of this piece are the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila. This process provides intellectual fuel for the next work. Much of what we need to know about our next piece is contained in our current work. In this process, I take note that further exploration, research, analysis, and thinking about the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila might have the power to guide the next piece. And it's at this point in the process that as a central thesis for the aboutness of this work, for an interpretation of this work, I arrive at the idea that this work is a kind of reformulation or a new approach to American transcendentalism. As my research into the imagery of my print develops, a central idea begins to slowly emerge. I begin to understand the thing that I've made. Put as simply as possible, the mysticism of the Great Pyramids of Giza, plus the archetypal American self-reliance of Grant Wood, plus the ego death of the Nemean lion equals a new American transcendentalism. The next phase in the process is to address the form of the work, the color, shape, line, form, and the semiotics of the piece. Since the early 1990s, typographic form, has played a central role in my work. In order to understand the way I approach form, texts like Peter Berger's theory of the avant-garde provide crucial insight. The final stage of this process is to think about what I like to call the extended conceptual framework. Big words for ideas that fall outside the frame of the work. Art can be seen as a tool to help bridge the unfathomable chasm between humans. Art is thinking made manifest in material. Are you getting this? This is a big point for the episode. Art and design objects are a component of the human struggle against solipsism in that they are objectified thought. They're an intermediary between subjects.
Yeah! Ha-ha!
Anybody got a lint roller? I just realized I got mauled by this guy. Hi! Oh, hi! How are you? Hi. Right before I came to the studio, it looked like I just rolled out of bed. Late capitalist culture, for very specific reasons, has institutionalized stupidity. Stupid is what we have become. The shitstorm of media that is our contemporary culture out of necessity, has shortened our attention spans and driven us to intentional distraction. Art and design objects can fight both the numbing and the dumbing of our culture by being structured in a specific way. All right, we needed a mnemonic device to help us with our thinking. I want to talk about Master P with one modification. I want you to think about his hottest single. That shit was fire, right? So I want you to think about Fire P. What is Fire P? It's not just what you get when you eat too many jalapenos.
You guys want to have a discussion about work or anything?
I got a question. How does this process work if you're doing it sort of in the middle of a piece? You know, because I feel like the way that you're talking about it right now, which is super helpful for like generating the next thing, is sort of like at the end, or you know, when you have those component parts broken out. Do you ever do this as sort of like a way to get unstuck, or like when you're in the middle of something, trying to like crack the code of like what it might need?